13 goddamn years it took for the second episode of Spess Meuhine to come out. The first game was a relatively faithful adaptation of Warhammer 40,000, 40k for short, with its gothic architecture, the dystopian state of the galaxy, at least regarding the life on the Forge world, the struggle of humanity to survive, and of course the Angels of Death of the God Emperor, the Adeptus Astartes, also known as
Spess Meuhine!
As a quick note, because I know it's going to come up in the comments, I have read some of the Horus Heresy books and I used to play the game in 7th and 8th edition of the tabletop. I dropped it because Games Workshop is even more greedy than your average OnlyFans thought. Now I just paint a few models on occasion. If you want a deep dive in the lore, that's what the blonde bimbo is for. So, let's see what a decade lost in warp without Gellerfield has done to the franchise, shall we?
There may be a way.
Right, so just like the first game, we found our boy Demetrian Titus going after a Xenos Horde army, and rightfully genociding so many buggos, Reddit will start comparing blacks to Tyranids, if they haven't already, that is. Obviously, this is completely a combat game, and just like the first episode, this is about as subtle as a 90s beat 'em up, which is probably exactly what you want from a Spess Meuhine game. The first episode was decent, but it had quite a bit of junk in it, plus some gameplay choices typical of the 2010s, like QTEs, and some really questionable ideas like the lack of invulnerability while doing an execution move, routinely used to restore your health. I always assumed that's where Doom 2016 got its glory kill inspiration from. This new vintage corrects a number of issues I had with the first game, but is also adding some of its own that we're going to talk about.
The Codex Astartes does not support this action.
Try to keep up.
The combat is a combination of both range and melee, but since you are fighting Tyranids numbering in the billions, you don't have enough ammunition for this. Hell, the entire planet probably doesn't have the ammunition for this. Not that it's going to stop you from trying. You get your basic bitch sidearms like the bolt pistol, which is now limited ammunition but much better than it was in the first episode. You get multiple variants of bolters, you get your heavy bolters, you get your plasma incinerator, you get your melter guns, you have a ton of weapons. And while some of them seem to be a little bit redundant compared to some of the other in the lineup, you have some that are also, how can I put this, more situational and feel a lot better depending on the range that you are from the enemy. For example, if you choose the bolt carbine, it's obviously firing a lot faster. It has more spread, so it's not as effective at longer ranges. However, if you are in a close combat situation, you can get rid of a number of buggos relatively fast. Though obviously the melter gun or the game equivalent to a shotgun is going to be far superior. And so while most of them are very satisfying to use, apparently there are still some idiots in the Mechanicus, 40 millenniums in the future, who still believe burst fire is a good idea. You obviously also have access to a few types of grenade, like the frag grenade, crack grenade, you have a shot grenade, I believe I saw vortex grenade at some point, but because you're fighting against Tyranids, eventually you will go into melee with monsters with claws so big they will make the average black singer green with envy. When that happens, you have a few options. You have your basic combat knife, which is very speedy but is only really tailored towards fighting a single unit. You have your chainsword, which is already much better at dealing with bigger groups. You have your power sword, which is going to be one-shotting your basic enemies left, right and center. You have the thunder hammer, which is ironically more tailored towards dealing with hordes than single enemies. And then finally you have the power fists, which the game tells me is better to deal with bigger groups, but I don't really find it as effective as the thunder hammer. So we have a pretty decent arsenal, but sadly that's also where the game is going to start its questionable choices. First of all, in the previous game, Titus could carry up to 4 weapons, including a secondary with infinite ammo. Nothing particularly surprising considering the physique of the Spess Meuhine, in power armor especially. So why in the name of all that is cursed are we limited to only 2 weapons in single player? And these are not even 2 primaries, no. You get a long gun of some kind, plus a sidearm, which are sometimes as big as primaries, so I really don't see the point of some carbines being considered main weapons. Honestly, I felt like it was Duke Nukem Forever all over again when I noticed that. On some occasion, you can also find special weapons, like the heavy bolter, that you can carry until you either drop it, or have its ammunition depleted. But I don't really see the reason behind such limitation in a campaign, even if you are playing in co-op. I'm certain someone will say it's about balancing because Tyranids are overall a little bit more squishy than orcs, which is true, but in the first game, Gretchins were also one-shot kills. Boys were a little bit more resistant, and in this game the base guns are routinely dispatched with a single bolt or a swing of a power sword. but there are way more of them than we saw orcs. Which leads to another issue in my opinion. The devs have taken cue from the first game moveset, but they have also clearly lifted a few elements from other games like the Dark Souls series, and I also think from Bloodborne and its way more aggressive playstyle. By this, I mean we have a parry system to instantly dispatch a base enemy, or, if followed by a perfect parry or perfect dodge, place a bolt in your silly little heads. Do enough damage, and you can perform an execution move on a critter, often very brutal and gory to my giggling delight. This time around though, you no longer recover life by doing so. You recover armor sections, of which you can have between 2 to 4 depending on the armor pattern you are using, Tacticus, Phobos or Gravis if I remember correctly, but that's more for multiplayer. In campaign mode, you always have a maximum of 3. This time around also, you do have invulnerability while executing such move, which is a good thing considering how frustrating it could be in the first game to desperately be locked in animation trying to heal, only for some knob to stick you in the back. So if you want to heal now, you can carry up to 2 stim packs, which can be found in various crates or just lying around to restore your health. If you fall, you may also be raised by your buddies, even the AI control one, but falling again within a certain amount of time means actual death and go back to the checkpoint. The main problem I have with this combat system is the lack of consistency in the parry and dodge windows. For example, if a Hormigaunt, the best melee critter, tries to jump you and you see a parry symbol, pressing the parry button immediately triggers the animation. However, against a warrior or lictors or any of the higher tier enemies, the window often requires delays. The most egregious is the Zoanthrope or its evolved version, the Neurothrope if I remember correctly, that will display the reg dot symbol, but will not actually perform the attack until several seconds after the symbol goes away, which, if you are busy dealing with other bugs, will cause you to be hit, stun locked and lose about half of your health. And that's a problem you will regularly encounter, as it's pretty easy to end up in a weird position with a horde of Gaunts and warriors just attacking you in unison and draining your armor and health in seconds. This is made worse by the fact that, despite your character weighing in excess of 500 kilos or 1100 pounds, you cannot dodge out of the situation as enemy collision boxes lock you in place instead of getting turned into lubricant right here and there. And since there is a multiplayer mode, I dabbled with it a little bit for once, so let's talk about it. You have a PvE mode called Operation, taking place in parallel with the main campaign with 3 guys. This mode has a few maps that you can play in different difficulty levels, which will increase the enemy count, change the enemy type, that sort of things. And at the end of each map, you will get experience with your weapon, getting upgrades for them, or access flat out better equipment and cosmetic pieces, for both Loyalist and Traitor Astartes. And while it is linear progression within a certain chapter or certain legion, you are not obligated to go entirely through one before you access another. This way you can get exactly the armor pieces or the colors that you actually want. And while it is very fun to recreate potentially your favorite chapter or your own custom chapter like I did, save for the insignia because mine is 3D printed, it is very grindy, which sadly you need to engage with if you want to use the full capabilities of the armor and chapter color editor. The other thing I find a bit odd is that the class are essentially only including the early-ish 9th edition stuff, like the Bulwarks and Reavers for example, but we are missing a number of classes like the Terminators on both sides. There are also no vehicles whatsoever, which is a real shame considering they modeled the Repulsor tank and the Dreadnoughts. I would say overall, though it's fun to go through the operation mode at least once to get the full experience of the different mission and some enemies that you don't actually encounter in the base campaign, it will suffer from the lack of diversity you will also experience in the campaign mode, meaning that the objectives are pretty much always go there, press that button, kill that enemy with a horde section regularly, and that's about it, even if the operation mode shuffles the enemies around a little bit. In Eternal War mode, you will fight 6 against 6 between Imperium and Chaos, with 1-to-1 weapons equivalent, nothing asymmetrical there, in either Team Deathmatch or Zone Capture. This is a very 2010s design, and I'm sure it's someone's cup of tea, but it's really not mine, especially when a low-level player gets pitted against high-level veterans with far superior gear and character upgrades. I'm very rarely into PvP modes, but this is exactly the kind of stuff that repulsed me in the 2010s.
The Codex Astartes does not support this action.
Out on the audio. The guns sound meaty, the engines of the Imperium lack any sense of subtlety, and everything sounds apart. And just like in the first game, even in the middle of the chaos of battle, you always know when to reload as the gun's cycling sound changes in the last few rounds. The force weapons have a little swooshing sound every single time you swing them, and the bugs are making chittering or roaring sounds. The Reaper swarms also pop nicely with judicious application of Prometheum, all very, very nice on the ambient sound. The music is also very much on point and makes a lot of use of choirs during the important fights, or gets more ominous when Chaos starts stirring shit. It doesn't go quite as hard as Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, my all-time favorite, but it gets damn close. The only thing I find a little bit grating is some of the voice acting choices. Our boy Titus got a new actor with Clive Standen, who does his best impression of Horus Lupercal, Mark Strong, and the two are pretty close in tone, but I still give an edge to Mark Strong. Maybe it's because of the direction, or because Titus is considerably angrier in this game, but the character sounded a lot calmer and wiser in the previous game, even though this is 200 years later.
Why do you still interpret the Codex so narrowly?
A bit of a disappointment on the villain, and obviously the needs don't speak, but the Chaos Forces really don't have the presence of good old Nemeroth. The one thing that really grinds my gear though is the new captain of the second company, who couldn't be more Scottish, to the point that I genuinely wondered why the fuck is a space wolf leading the second company of the Girly Man Boys. This team continues somewhat in the visual department. Regarding the environment, everything is conforming very, very well to the Imperium Gothic architecture in RF City, and the Imperial areas really do look like what you'd find in a Sector Mechanicus box set. The devs have also abandoned the first episode habit of putting a brown filter over everything, a very 2010 thing that made everything look really dull and needed to die in a fire. Now we have really vibrant colors that really appeal to the eye, and much closer to some of the best paint job out there. No, not mine, I'm decent enough, but I'm not going to try for a golden demon. The game models pretty damn faithfully reproduce the equipment of both the Spess Meuhines and the bugs, both on the armor, including the Deathwatch Mark 8 and the new Mark 10 worn by the Primaris, regardless of pattern, and the weapons all coming from either the older Deathwatch Codex or the newer stuff that came in the 9th and 10th edition. I do feel a little bit disappointed that unlike the first game, you do not collect any sort of straight upgrade to your armor that will show on your character, which is a shame because since the Primaris Marines came out, the different chapters have lost a lot of personality. It's also a shame that we are starting on a jungle planet, yet we do not see any Catachans who would have been completely at home here. Instead, probably because Games Workshop demanded to use models they currently sell, and they can't be bothered to support their own fucking lore with plastic, we get basic bitch Cadians. The absolute biggest disappointment for me though is that in multiplayer, if you are playing Chaos, there is no customization for your armor to really speak of. You can recolor the armor, but playing as a tactical will always make you look like a Black Legion, Assault will be Night Lords, Sniper will be Alpha Legion, Heavy will be Death Guard, and so on. I don't even know what they were thinking on the Night Lords, as their signature electric field around the armor is badly hedged into the plates here. It looks so bad, which is really weird when the Charge Power Sword effect looks so good. I imagine there will be in a DLC, but right now, yuck! So, in terms of writing, the game has clearly been designed first and foremost to be played as a campaign, as it should. So, in case you need a reminder or you didn't play the first game, our man, Demetrian Titus, is a captain, aka the commanding officer of 100 Brothers, of the Ultramarine, the founding chapter of Robot Girly Man, dispatched to the Forge World of Goya to repel orcs, led by the best character in the series,
I'm Boss Grimskull! This whole planet is mine!
with his best buddy Sergeant Sidonius, and Leandros, who will now be referred to as Bitch Boy. Turns out, the Inquisition was being done with a Chaos artifact, again, causing a slight infestation of Bloodletter and Black Legion, led by Chaos Lord Nemeroth. Bitch Boy being a bitch boy, he is very unhappy his commanding officer is so autistic Chaos Corruption doesn't do shit to him. So Titus goes to kill Nemeroth, who has gotten promoted to Demon Prince, and destroys the artifact to put an end to the invasion. Happy ending! Except, of course, Bitch Boy channeled all of his male feminist energy and decided to go behind the back of the chaplain and all of the Ultramarine hierarchy, breaking the codex he bitched about all game to throw hard chat Titus to the Inquisition. Titus goes with them to save the rest of the people on the planet, except it's a chaos infestation, which means the Inquisition probably killed everyone on the planet anyway and replaced the population. Anyway, fast forward a couple hundred years, meaning our boy is now over 400, and we find him working for the specialized Xenos killers of the Death Watch, this time trying to stop a Tyranid invasion from consuming the populated planets in the system, in this case by dispersing a virus in the atmosphere. After being separated during descent, Titus finds the other members of the squad, including a Black Templar, a traitor Astartes, our boy Ulfa from Rogue Trader who dies like a pussy, and finally a Blood Angel before launching the virus and getting cornered by Boggos. including a carnifex that takes umbrage at him having more than one heart. Saved by his ultramarine brothers and now a primaris after a conversion therapy, he finds himself now a lieutenant of the second company, working under the Space Wolf in disguise I mentioned before, and harassed by a suspiciously bitchy chaplain. We also meet the other two members of the squad, Chiron and Gadriel. I will note, while I wouldn't call the game woke, it's pretty clear when compared to the old Codex's art that the Ultramarines have gotten through a lot of DI hiring. As the game goes on, killing a number of Tyranids, recovering some Magos data, and eventually saving his tech priest minion, our boy discovers the Mechanicus has been, well, about as stupid as ever, and reconstructed the artifact from Greya to activate a weapon known as Aurora, which turns out to be some Necron gizmo, if the out-of-print Forger models were too subtle for you. Obviously, as soon as it fires, and because Games Workshop probably thought 2 Xenos rays were a bit too much, brings a bunch of Chaos Forces, this time from Siege, which means hordes of Tsengors, way squishier than Bloodletters, and Thousand Sons, which are about equivalent to the Black Legion of the first game, except they got Terminator armors. And also Saber probably didn't have the balls to bring Slanesh out to play. Only Safe Horny for you. The Tyranid part of the campaign comes to a very abrupt and disappointing end with merely a big horde fight including 3 Carnifexes, plus a Tyrant fight in Operation mode. I really feel the Tyranids were not explored deep enough. We could have had a desperate attempt going to a hive ship to capture a known queen for her DNA and make another virus bomb, but nope, kill a few enemies and that's it. On the Chaos side of the operation, we do get a far more satisfying content, including fighting a Helldrake in Operation mode, defending an Ultramarine standard, the mission that goes the hardest in the entire game, and sees the Chapter Master Kalgar in action. But the main villain, Imura, besides his ability to fuck with your head a little bit, doesn't have even half the presence Nemeroth had. So after Titus breaks the artifact for the second goddamn time, making sure the Mechanicus can fuck with it again, the warp rift closes and all is well again. As long as you forget about the Tyranid splinter fit that is definitely still in the fucking system. Anyway, our boy is presented with the Ultramarine Medal of Honor, and as he heads towards his next mission with Kalgar, the bitchy chaplain reveals himself to be none other than Bitch Boy himself, not hiding his animosity no matter how much shit our absolute chat has just gone through. Twice! So in conclusion, the game has managed to entertain me for about as long as the campaign mode lasted, which is going to take you around 15 hours-ish I would say in normal mode. However, there are also some pretty glaring omissions, like the Tyranid invasion being completely forgotten because no, just killing a Hive Tyrant will not stop an invasion in its tracks, making me think we might get some story DLC, especially considering we are boarding a Stormhawk at the end with Kalgar and Bitch Boy. At the very least I hope so, because when we talk about the gameplay itself, objectively, it's very average. Like I said, the combat is a little bit jank, and there is pretty much no diversity in objective. It's always going to be, kill this guy, kill this horde, go press that button, and that's it. The game is very well lifted by top-notch art and audio, and I personally enjoyed the relationship between Titus and his squad in the last half of the game, but it's also giving me the impression of playing it very safe. A little bit like Force Awakens when it came out and was pretty much just a scene-by-scene remake of New Hope. I would have found it a lot more interesting if the Girlyman boss had been engaged by Tyranids and received aid from the Farsight Enclaves, for example, with the possibility of a tense relationship between the Guards Regiment and Gevessas. That would have been cool, and I would have liked to see how Titus handles that kind of situation. So in my opinion, if you already enjoy 40k, I'm pretty sure you're going to like this. It's a solid game that deserves a buy, though I would not get the season pass right now. I'd wait to see what they're going to come up with, and maybe then you can consider buying the expansions. Like I said, personally, I really want to see a conclusion to the Tyranid invasion because it is absolutely not over, so we'll see what the future holds for this game. Salut, bonsoir!